Jack had always dreamed of adventure, but nothing could have prepared him for the day he met Lyra. He was a soldier stationed on a remote military base, far from home. The alien planet was beautiful in its own strange, whalish forests, purple, skies, and towering mountains in the distance. But despite the beauty, Jack found himself feeling lonely. The days were long, and the people around him were either too busy with their duties or too different to form any real connections. One day, while on a routine patrol, Jack wandered into a small village on the outskirts of the base. The villagers were quiet, mostly keeping to themselves. Jack didn't expect much from the visit, but as he walked through the market, his eyes caught sight of someone different. A woman, standing alone by a fruit stand, was looking at him with an almost curious gaze. She was unlike anyone Jack had ever seen. She wasn't alien in the way Jack had expected, with strange skin or Otuvda's world features. Instead, she was striking in her own way. Her skin had a soft, pale hue like polished marble, and her eyes were the color of the softest blue. Her long hair flowed like silken threads down her back. She was beautiful, in a quiet, graceful way. Jack couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something about her presence that felt calm yet mysterious. She didn't seem out of place among the alien villagers, but Jack felt drawn to her. He wasn't sure why, but he approached her. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice carrying the hesitation of someone unused to speaking to strangers. "I've never seen you around here before. Are you new?" The woman looked up, and a smile touched her lips. It wasn't the wide grin of someone trying to be friendly, but a gentle, almost secretive smile. She spoke in a soft, melodic voice. "I come here often, but I don't stay long," she said, her words carrying a strange kind of warmth. "Lyra Jack," he said, his heart suddenly beating faster. He wasn't sure why, but he felt an instant connection to her. "I'm with the military here, just passing through." "I see," she replied, her eyes studying him closely. There was a brief pause before she added, "I don't get many visitors from your world. What brings you to this village?" Jack wasn't sure how to answer. The truth was, he didn't really know. He had only come to the village to escape the dull routine of base life. But something about Lyra's presence made him want to open up. Just tired of the base, I guess. Wanted a break from the usual. Lyra nodded, as if she understood, but said nothing more. Instead, she turned her attention back to the fruit stand, picking up a small round fruit. She handed it to Jack with a smile. "Try this," she said. "It's from my garden." Jack took the fruit, unsure of what it was, but he trusted her. He had no reason not to. He took a bite, and the sweetness surprised him. It was unlike anything he had tasted before. "Ow," he said, smiling in surprise. "That's incredible. What is it?" "A rare fruit," Lyra answered. "Not many people outside of this world have tasted it." They stood there for a moment, not saying much but enjoying each other's company. Jack had never felt so at ease with someone he barely knew. Lyra didn't ask questions, and she didn't seem interested in small talk. She just existed, calm and composed. The quiet of the village was broken by the sound of a distant horn from the base, signaling the end of Jack's break. He looked back toward the direction of the sound, but when he turned to say goodbye to Lyra, she was already gone. It was as if she had never been there. That night, Jack couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious woman. He'd seen plenty of strange creatures during his time on the base, but none had affected him like Lyra had. There was something about her that made him feel alive, as if a part of him had been awakened. The next day, Jack found himself returning to the village, hoping to see her again. He wasn't sure what he would say or what he was looking for, but he had to see her once more. When he arrived, he almost couldn't believe his eyes. There she was, sitting under a large tree by the village center reading a book. She was completely absorbed in what she was doing, unaware of Jack's presence. Jack hesitated for a moment before walking over to her. "Lyra," he called softly. She looked up from her book and smiled at him, a smile that seemed to light up her entire face. "Jack, I didn't expect to see you again." Jack sat down next to her without thinking. "I don't know why, but I felt like I had to come back. You're different." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Jack didn't have a good answer. I don't know, he said again. It's just, there's something about you, something I can't explain. Lyra's smile softened, and she closed her book. Maybe it's just that you're ready to find something new. Jack felt his heart race. Could she be right? Is it possible that his life was about to change in a way he never expected? As Jack and Lyra continued to meet over the next few weeks, their bond grew stronger. They talked about everything and nothing. Jack learned that Lyra was not from any planet Jack knew of. Her stories were filled with hints of a life beyond what he could imagine. But she never revealed too much. Jack didn't press her for details. He was happy to be with her, even if he didn't fully understand who she was. He didn't know it yet. But his life was about to change forever. As the days passed, Jack and Lyra's relationship grew stronger. They spent more and more time together, and Jack couldn't help but look forward to their meetings. It became a routine for him. He'd finish his military duties and then head to the village to see Lyra. There was something about the calmness she exuded that made Jack feel at peace. With her, he didn't have to worry about the noise of the base or the pressures of his job. Lyra, on the other hand, seemed to enjoy the quiet moments with Jack as well. She rarely spoke about her past or where she came from, but Jack didn't mind. She made him feel like they were living in their own little world, away from everything else. One afternoon, Jack invited her to take a walk through the forest near the village. It was a quiet place, filled with tall trees that stretched toward the sky, their leaves swaying gently in the wind. Lyra agreed without hesitation, and the two of them wandered beneath the trees, enjoying the peaceful silence. "Do you miss your home?" Jack asked, glancing over at Lyra as they walked. Lyra's eyes looked far away, as if she were lost in thought. "Sometimes," she said softly, "but I've learned that home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the people you're with." Jack nodded, understanding what she meant. His life had always been about following orders, never really having a place to call his own. The base was home because it was where he was stationed, but he had never felt truly attached to it. Lyra made him feel like he had a place in the universe, a purpose beyond just being a soldier. As they walked, Jack couldn't help but admire how graceful Lyra was. She moved with a fluidity that was almost otherworldly. Her hair shimmered in the sunlight, and her eyes held a depth that Jack couldn't quite understand. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. There was an air of mystery about her, but it wasn't something that made him uncomfortable. Instead, it made him want to learn more. "Where do you come from?" Jack asked, his curiosity finally getting the best of him. Lyra smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with something Jack couldn't place. "I come from far away. It's from a place you wouldn't be able to imagine." Jack laughed, not knowing how to respond. He had no idea how far away that could be. But Lyra's smile was warm, and her voice carried no hint of deception. He had no reason to doubt her. "Well, wherever it is, it must be beautiful," Jack said. His words more of a wish than a statement. Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment, she looked almost sad. "It was," she said quietly, "but I left it behind a long time ago." Jack didn't press her further. There was something about Lyra's past that she didn't want to talk about, and Jack respected that. He wasn't interested in pushing her to reveal things she wasn't ready to share. Instead, they spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the forest, talking about everything and nothing at all. Jack found himself enjoying the simplicity of their conversations. They didn't need to discuss anything serious to feel close. It was enough just to be together. Over the next few weeks, Jack and Lyra continued to grow closer. Jack would visit her every chance he got, and they would talk for hours, often until the stars filled the sky. They shared stories about their lives, though Lyra's stories were always vague, and Jack never pressed her for more details. Jack's friends on the base noticed the change in him. He wasn't as distracted or moody as he had been before. He had a lightness in his step, and he couldn't stop talking about Lyra. His squad mates would tease him, joking that he was in love, but Jack didn't care. They didn't understand. Lyra wasn't just any alien woman. She was someone who made him feel like he belonged. One evening, as they sat by the edge of a small lake, Lyra turned to Jack with a question in her eyes. "Do you ever think about the future? she asked softly. Jack paused, staring at the calm water in front of them. It wasn't a question he had thought much about. He had always lived in the present, focused on his duties as a soldier. But now, with Lyra by his side, the future didn't seem as distant as it once had. I used to think about it, Jack said, but I never really knew what I wanted. It was always about the mission, the job. But with you, things seem different. Lyra smiled. At him, her gaze gentle and knowing. Sometimes the future comes to us in ways we don't expect. We can't always control it, but we can choose how we face it. Jack looked at her, wondering what she meant by that. She always spoke with such wisdom, as if she had lived through more than he could imagine. But there was a calmness in her words, a sense of peace that made Jack feel like everything would be okay. The more time Jack spent with Lyra, the more he realized how deeply he had fallen for her. There was something about her that felt like home, even though he didn't fully understand who she was or where she came from. He didn't need to know everything. What mattered was the connection they shared, and for the first time in his life, Jack felt like he was part of something larger than himself. One evening, after a long day on the base, Jack went to see Lyra, his heart racing with anticipation. He had made up his mind. He wanted to tell her how he felt. He wanted to be with her, no matter what. When he arrived at her home, he found her sitting by the window, looking out at the stars. Jack approached her quietly, not wanting to disturb her. "Lyra," he said softly. She turned to face him, a soft smile on her lips. "Jack, I've been thinking a lot lately," Jack said, his voice uncertain, but full of emotion. "I want to be with you. I don't care where you come from or what your past is. Just know that I care about you more than anything." Lyra's expression softened, and she walked toward him. She didn't say anything at first. She simply reached out and took his hand, as if she had been waiting for him to say those words. And in that moment, Jack knew that no matter what the future held, he had found something worth fighting for. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with excitement and uncertainty for Jack. He had never imagined that his life would lead him to this moment. His heart raced every time he thought about marrying Lyra. He had fallen in love with her in a way that felt deeper than anything he had ever experienced. But there was also a small part of him that worried. Lyra had been so secretive about her past, and Jack wasn't sure if he truly knew everything about her. But despite those small doubts, Jack couldn't deny how much he cared for her. He didn't need to know everything about her. He loved the way she made him feel, and that was enough. Lyra, on the other hand, seemed calm and composed as always. She never showed any signs of nervousness. She was graceful, thoughtful, and wise beyond her years. Jack couldn't help but admire her strength and poise. But there were moments when he wondered what lay beneath the surface. What had she left behind to come to this planet? Why had she kept so much of her past hidden from him? Despite these questions, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that marrying her was the right thing to do. They had shared so many quiet moments together, moments that had bonded them in ways Jack couldn't explain. The connection they shared was real, and that was what mattered. The wedding was a simple affair, held in a small clearing in the forest near the village. There were no grand decorations or extravagant guests. Only a few people, those closest to Lyra, attended. But they remained in the background, allowing the couple to enjoy their special moment. It felt intimate, private, and personal. Jack stood nervously by the small altar, wearing a simple suit that the village tailor had made for him. He didn't need anything fancy. What mattered was the promise he was about to make to Lyra. His hand shook slightly as he adjusted his collar. Glancing around the clearing, trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the scene. Lyra arrived, walking slowly toward him. Her white dress shimmered in the fading light, and her hair flowed behind her like a silken river. She looked as breathtaking as ever. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he watched her approach. She was everything he had ever dreamed of. And in that moment, he knew he was ready to spend his life with her. As she reached him, Lyra smiled softly, her eyes meeting Jack's. She didn't speak, but her gaze said everything. There was love and trust in her eyes, and Jack felt the weight of it on his heart. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Village elder, a quiet woman with long silver hair, spoke a few words about love, trust, and the joining of two souls. Jack barely heard her words, lost in the moment as he looked at Lyra. This was real. This was happening. "I vow to stand by you," Jack said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "In good times and bad, in light and in darkness. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for as long as I live." Lyra's voice was soft, but filled with emotion as she replied, "I vow to stand by you as well. I promise to trust you, to support you, and to love you for the rest of my days." They exchanged rings, a simple band for Jack, a delicate silver ring for Lyra, and then, with a gentle smile, the village elder pronounced them husband and wife. The moment the ceremony was over, Jack pulled Lyra into his arms, holding her close. He had never felt so complete. She fit perfectly in his arms, as if they were always meant to be together. The celebration afterward was small but warm. Lyra's friends and family congratulated the couple, though they kept their distance. Noticed that many of them looked at him with curiosity, and some seemed to watch him with interest. But he didn't mind. He was too happy to care. Later that evening, as they sat by the fire, Lyra looked at Jack with a serious expression. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly. Jack looked at her, sensing the change in her tone. "What is it?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've kept something from you. It's not because I don't trust you, but because I wanted to give us a chance to build our life without it. The truth is, I come from a very powerful family. My people they control much of the galaxy's wealth and influence. I didn't want you to marry me because of that." Jack was silent for a long time. He had never expected this. He knew that Lyra was different, but he hadn't imagined this level of power or wealth. It was overwhelming, and for a moment, he didn't know how to react. But after a long pause, he spoke softly. "I don't care about any of that, Lyra. I love you, not your wealth or status." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to hold his hand. "I've been running from it for so long," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't want anyone to see me as just another rich person. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have." Jack squeezed her hand, offering a reassuring smile. "I don't love you because of what you have. I love you because of who you are. That's all that matters to me." Lyra smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. For the rest of the evening, they sat together in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, with the fire crackling softly beside them. The weight of Lyra's confession hung in the air, but Jack felt no fear or anger. He had come to love her for everything she was, and that wouldn't change. No matter where she came from or what she had, Jack knew that the most important thing was their bond. Jack had always known that Lyra was special. There was an air of mystery around her, a quiet confidence that set her apart from everyone else. But he never expected the truth to be so overwhelming. It started with an invitation. Lyra, with her usual calm and collected manner, had told him one evening that they were going to a gathering. Jack had assumed it was just another small gathering with some of her friends from the village, maybe even a few military personnel from the base. He never imagined it would be anything more than a casual event. On the day of the gathering, Jack wore a simple outfit, just a dark shirt and trousers, but Lyra insisted he wear something more formal. "It's a special occasion," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Jack didn't question it. He trusted her completely. When they arrived, Jack was immediately struck by the size of the building. It was massive, far larger than anything in the village. The architecture was elegant and foreign, with tall, sweeping columns and polished marble floors that gleamed in the light. It didn't look like anything Jack had ever seen before. They were escorted inside by a servant who didn't speak, only nodded politely as he led them through grand halls filled with expensive-looking artwork and decorations. Jack tried not to stare, but everything felt so out of place for him. He was just a soldier, used to the utilitarian spaces of the base, not the grand opulence that surrounded him. Lyra walked beside him, her composure unshaken. Jack noticed that she seemed to know everyone they passed. The other guests greeted her with polite smiles and respectful nods. Some looked at Jack with curiosity, but none of them said a word. It was as though they were all waiting for something, and Jack wasn't sure what. When they reached the main hall, Lyra stopped. She turned to Jack with a soft smile. "This is where we part ways for a while," she said. "I have some people I need to speak with. Please, enjoy the event." Jack stood, frozen for a moment. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra's smile faded slightly, but she looked at him with gentle eyes. "This is my family's home," she said. "This is where I come from." Before Jack could ask anything else, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Jack stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. He felt out of place, unsure of whether to mingle or just wait for Lyra. The guests around him were dressed in fine clothing, speaking in hushed tones about things Jack couldn't understand. He realized that he wasn't just at any gathering, was at something much larger, something beyond his comprehension. As Jack stood near the edge of the room, trying to blend in, he noticed that people were starting to gather around a central platform. There was a long table with drinks and snacks, and a few people had started to speak, sharing stories and laughter. Jack wasn't sure if he should join, but something told him to stay where he was. That was when he saw Lyra, standing with a tall man who was speaking to her with great seriousness. She looked up and met Jack's eyes across the room. A faint smile tugged at her lips, but it quickly disappeared. Jack felt a sudden tension in the air, as though something was about to happen. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. A few minutes later, the man who had been speaking with Lyra turned and made his way toward Jack. He had an air of authority about him, his movements sharp and calculated. Jack instinctively straightened up, unsure of who this man was or what he wanted. "Are you human soldier who married Lyra?" the man asked, his voice smooth and controlled. Jack nodded cautiously. "Yes, I'm Jack." The man's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Jack. "I've heard a great deal about you. You've done something no one here expected." Jack didn't know how to respond, so he simply nodded again. "I didn't expect any of this either." The man smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "You are married to her, but I think you still don't understand who she really is." Jack frowned, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. "What do you mean?" The man leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Lyra is not just any alien. She is the heir to one of the largest and most powerful families in the galaxy. Her family controls vast amounts of wealth, influence, and power. She is a galactic billionaire, Jack. You've married into the heart of an empire." The words hit Jack like a punch to the chest. His mind raced as he processed the information. Lyra was a billionaire. The thought seemed impossible. She had never mentioned anything like that. But then again, she had kept so much hidden from him. "You're lying," Jack said, his voice shaking slightly. He didn't want to believe it. It couldn't be true. Lyra had never acted like someone who came from wealth and power. She had always been humble, kind, and private. The man shrugged. "I'm not lying. You'll learn the truth soon enough. It's only a matter of time before she tells you herself." Before Jack could respond, the man turned and walked away, leaving Jack standing there, his mind spinning with questions. Lyra appeared again, cued toward Jack with her calm, graceful steps. She didn't look surprised to see him standing there, but Jack could see the faintest hint of concern in her eyes. "Jack," she said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. "Are you all right?" Jack looked at her, his emotions swirling. "Lyra, what's going on? Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes softened, and she stepped closer to him. "I didn't want you to marry me because of who I am, Jack. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for my family's wealth or power. I'm sorry I kept this from you." Jack's mind was racing. "You're a galactic billionaire. You're from a family that controls the galaxy? Why didn't you tell me this before?" Lyra lowered her gaze. "I was afraid. Afraid you would see me differently, that you would see me as just a title or a fortune, not as a person." Jack struggled to process everything. But in the end, he didn't care about her wealth. He loved Lyra for who she was. Still, this revelation left him feeling more uncertain than ever. "Lyra," Jack said, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I don't care about your family or their wealth. I care about you. You're the person I married, but why didn't you tell me?" Lyra's eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "I was afraid you would leave me." Jack took her hands in his, giving them a gentle squeeze. "I'm not going anywhere. I love you, Lyra, no matter what." The air felt heavy as Jack stood in the grand hall, the weight of the revelation settling deep within him. The walls around him, decorated with rich tapestries and fine paintings, felt cold and distant, a stark contrast to the warmth he had always felt with Lyra. He had just learned the truth, Lyra. The woman he had married, the woman he had fallen in love with, was from a powerful, wealthy family that controlled vast parts of the galaxy. Yet, here he was, standing in the same room as her, unsure of what to say or do next. He had never cared for wealth or power. To Jack, it had always been about the person, the heart of someone. And Lyra, with her quiet strength and kindness, had always been everything to him. But now, with this new knowledge, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that things were different. He wasn't sure how to face her, or how to process the weight of what had just been revealed. Lyra had left the gathering soon after Jack had learned the truth. She hadn't said a word, just looked at him with those soft, sad eyes, as if she had been expecting this reaction. Jack had stayed behind, letting the conversation with the mysterious man linger in his mind. How could Lyra hide something like this? Why had she kept her family's true identity a secret from him? After what felt like hours, Jack decided he couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. He left the hall and made his way to Lyra's room, determined to confront her, to find out why she hadn't trusted him with the truth. When he reached her door, he knocked lightly. For a moment, there was no answer. Then, a soft voice came from inside. "Jack, is that you?" He hesitated, his heart pounding. "It's me, Lyra. Can we talk?" There was a pause before she spoke again. "Of course. Come in." Jack opened the door and stepped inside. Lyra was sitting by the window, her back to him. She looked out into the vast night sky, her expression distant and lost in thought. Took a deep breath before walking toward her. The room was quiet, save for the soft rustling of the trees outside. "Lyra," Jack began, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? I love you, and I don't care about your wealth or your family's power, but why keep it from me?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with regret. "I didn't want you to see me differently, Jack. I didn't want you to think I was using you, or that you were only with me because of my family's name. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have." Jack felt a pang of guilt in his chest. He had never once thought of Lyra that way. But he understood now that her fear had kept her from trusting him completely. It wasn't about his feelings for her. It was about her own insecurities. "I never cared about your family's wealth, Lyra," Jack said softly, stepping closer to her. "I love you for you. That's all that matters to me." Lyra's eyes welled up with tears, and she stood up to face him. "I was scared, Jack. Scared that if you knew the truth, you would think I was just another spoiled rich girl. I've seen how people treat others when they think they're better than them. I didn't want that for us." Jack reached out and gently took her hands in his. "I don't think that, Lyra. I never have. I married you because of the person you are. You've always been kind, humble, and real with me. That's why I love you." Lyra's tears spilled over, but she didn't pull away. She leaned into Jack, resting her head on his chest. "I've spent so long hiding who I really am, Jack. I thought if I kept it a secret, we could have a normal life away from the expectations and the pressures of my family." Jack held her close, feeling the weight of her words. He understood now Lyra had been trying to protect their relationship from the very thing that was supposed to make it stronger. Her past, her family's wealth, had been a barrier she had built herself. It wasn't about hiding the truth from him. It was about protecting the love they had. "You don't have to hide from me anymore," Jack whispered. "You never had to. I want to face everything with you, Lyra. Your family, your past, whatever it is, I'm here." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You really mean that, don't you?" Jack nodded. "I do. I don't care what's in your past. I care about our future. As long as you're with me, that's all I need." Lyra smiled through her tears, the weight of her secret finally lifting. "I don't deserve you, Jack," she said, her voice trembling. Jack smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You do. You've always deserved someone who sees you for who you are, and that's me." They stood there for a moment, holding each other in the quiet room, the world outside fading away. Jack didn't need to know all the details of Lyra's past. He didn't need to understand the full extent of her family's power or wealth. What mattered was the bond they shared, the love they had built together. It was real, and it was theirs. "Let's face everything together, Lyra," Jack said softly. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Lyra nodded, a soft smile crossing her face. "Together," she whispered. Jack leaned in and kissed her forehead, feeling the strength of their connection. No matter what the future held, he knew one thing for sure: he would always stand by her side. Together they would face whatever challenges came their way. The days after their conversation felt different, lighter somehow. Jack could see the change in Lyra. She no longer carried the weight of her secret, and he could see that she felt freer. The two of them began to grow even closer, learning more about each other every day. Lyra, who had once kept so much of herself hidden, was now more open with Jack than she had ever been. She was still the same woman he had fallen in love with, graceful, intelligent, and kind, but now there was a new sense of honesty between them. They spent their time together, talking about everything and nothing. They went on walks, sat by the lake, and shared stories about their childhoods. Jack learned more about Lyra's family and her life before they had met. She had grown up in a world of wealth and power, but it hadn't been as perfect as it might have seemed. Her family's expectations had always been high, and she had felt trapped by them for most of her life. For Lyra, the decision to leave her family behind had not been an easy one. She had always loved her people, but she couldn't live the life they had planned for her. That's why she had come to the small planet where Jack was stationed. She wanted to find something different, a life of peace, away from the pressures of her family's expectations. And when she met Jack, she had found that peace. Jack, on the other hand, had grown up with very different circumstances. He had always been a soldier, a man of duty, never knowing what it was like to have wealth or power. But the more he learned about Lyra's world, the more he realized that it wasn't the life he had ever wanted. He didn't need a palace or riches to be happy. All he needed was Lyra. As they spent more time together, Jack noticed how different their worlds were. The galactic society Lyra came from was a place of politics and power, where every decision was made with the future of entire civilizations in mind. But here, on this small planet, things were simpler. People lived in the moment, focused on what mattered to them. Jack liked it that way. Lyra had told him that her family had wanted her to take over their empire one day, but she had refused. She didn't want to rule over people from a distance. She wanted to be part of something real, something where she could make a difference in the lives of the people around her. And now, with Jack by her side, she felt like she had found that. One afternoon, as they sat together by the lake, Lyra turned to Jack with a serious expression. "I've been thinking a lot, Jack," she said softly. "About the future, about what comes next." Jack looked at her, sensing the weight in her voice. "What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I've been offered a position," she said. "It's an important role, one that could change things for me and for my people. And my family wants me to come back and take my place in their world. They need me." Jack felt a pang of fear in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "So, what does that mean for us?" Lyra looked down at her hands, twisting the ring Jack had given her. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I've been offered a life with power, with influence, but it's not the life I want. Not anymore." Jack reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her skin. "You don't have to choose that life, Lyra. We have our own life here, together. You don't need to go back to your family's empire to find happiness." Lyra met his eyes, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I don't want to go back, Jack, not if it means losing what we have. But I also don't want to turn my back on my people." Jack nodded, understanding the conflict she was feeling. He knew how much her family meant to her, but he also knew that they had no right to dictate her happiness. You don't have to. Choose between us and them, he said gently. You can find a way to make a difference without losing yourself in the process. Lyra looked at him, the weight of her decision heavy on her shoulders. I don't know how to do that, she admitted, but I know that I want to be with you. That's all I'm sure of right now. Jack smiled, squeezing her hand, and we'll figure it out together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. The next few weeks were filled with uncertainty, but also with hope. Lyra made the decision to turn down the offer from her family. She realized that power and wealth were not what she truly wanted. She wanted a life where she could be with the people she loved, where she could make a difference in ways that mattered to her just because it was expected of her. Lyra began working with the people on the planet, using her knowledge and skills to help improve their lives. She didn't need to be a billionaire to make a difference. She learned that true influence came from kindness, from building real connections with the people around her. Jack stood by her side through it all, supporting her every step of the way. Together, they built a new life, one that was simple, meaningful, and full of love. They didn't need riches or power to be happy. They had each other, and that was enough. As time passed, Jack and Lyra's bond only grew stronger. They built a future together, one where they could make a real difference. Without losing who they were, it wasn't easy, and there were challenges along the way. But they faced them together, side by side. One evening, as they sat under the stars, Jack took Lyra's hand and looked at her with a smile. Never thought I'd find a life like this, he said softly. A life that's mine, with you. Lyra leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. I never thought I'd find a life like this either, she whispered, but I'm so glad I did. With you. And as they sat together looking out at the stars, they knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, united, strong, and free.